I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Hey, we've got a great show for you tonight. It features loads of politics. Oregon has a new governor. Washington has a legislature that started its session today. And you know what? Regardless of which state you live in, the actions of these legislatures, they're definitely going to impact your life. We're also going to be taking a look at a new Oregon law that ensures farm workers get overtime pay for the first time in decades, and how a similar law in California may not be doing what it was intended to do. Is it a glimpse into the future for Oregon? We'll also take a look at some of the biggest weekend stories that you may have missed because, you were out running in the rain or something this weekend. But first, Oregon has a brand new governor for the first time since 2015, and that is our big story tonight. Tina Kotek, a progressive Democrat, became Oregon's 39th governor today. She's just the third female governor in state history and one of the country's first openly lesbian governors. Not the first, but one of the first. Here's a bit of her swearing in today in Salem.
I, Tina Kotek.
I, Tina Kotek.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution.
That I will support the Constitution.
Of the United States.
Of the United States.
And the Constitution.
And the Constitution.
Of the State of Oregon.
Of the State of Oregon.
And that I will faithfully.
And that I will faithfully.
Discharge the duties of governor.
Discharge the duties of governor.
The new governor took the oath there with her wife Amy Wilson at her side. State Supreme Court Chief Justice Megan Flynn did the honors. During her inaugural address, Governor Kotek talked about her family and her motivation to make a difference.
My grandparents were immigrants. My parents were proud first-generation Americans who believed in hard work and being engaged in their community. My mom, her name was Florence, volunteered at the library in my elementary school. After he retired, my dad, Jerry, volunteered on the local school board, not the school board, the zoning board. They did what they could to make things better for our family and for our community. When I was in my 20s, I fought for domestic partnership benefits for faculty and students at the University of Washington. That was a positive change for couples who had been denied for too long the dignity and respect everyone deserves.
By the way, I love showing you these longer comments, sound bites, we call them like this. It's the kind of stuff that I really enjoyed when I was covering the state legislature. You get to hear that if you're sitting there, but in a regular newscast, we give you just short sound bites like 10 seconds because we don't have time. Well, on this newscast, we're different. Thank you for watching. We're going to give you these longer pieces. Governor Kotek urged lawmakers to work for the good of all Oregonians, and she said she's going to conduct a listening tour in every county. She also quoted a surprising source of inspiration.
Governor Vic Atiyeh made a similar commitment in 1979. Here's what he said in his inaugural address. Quote, I have and will continue to listen, and not just only to those people who have the means and the urgency to press their case in Salem. I will go to our people to listen. I will go to every county of this state. I will be in your own communities, not talking to you, but meeting with you. I will listen to you, the elected representatives of our people, and to the many dedicated workers in our government who truly want to serve people. I will listen to all. Unquote. It may surprise some of you that Governor Atiyeh, the last Republican to serve in this role, has been a source of inspiration as I prepare to take on this great responsibility. He too was a former legislator with deep knowledge of our state budget, and we are both firsts. He, the first elected governor of Arab descent in the United States, and me, the first openly lesbian governor in the United States, along with the new governor of Massachusetts.
Governor Kotek also pledged to make bold action happen on two big issues facing Oregon. The first is a lack of housing.
For the future of our economy and our state, we must take on our housing crisis at the scale needed to solve it. So on my first full day in office tomorrow, I'm moving forward on two promises on this front. First, I'm signing an executive order that will address the underlying challenge facing our state. We need more housing. My executive order will establish an ambitious statewide housing production target of more than 36,000 new homes per year. And people, that's an 80% increase over recent construction trends.
We'll be watching closely to see how she plans to make that happen and how much it's going to cost taxpayers. Governor Kotek also said she will move fast on homelessness.
Second, I am declaring a homelessness state of emergency. Our state's response must meet the urgency of the humanitarian crisis we are facing. A lot of good work is already underway in communities across our state, and thank you for that. Still, we need everyone to keep bringing forward solutions. And to that end, I am proposing an urgent $130 million investment that will help at least another 1,200 Oregonians who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness move off the streets within a year.
The governor said she will call on lawmakers to fashion a package of spending to make that pledge happen. My back of the napkin math shows that spending $130 million on 1,200 people is about $108,000 per person. So that's definitely one we're going to keep an eye on as well. By the way, you might have noticed our Capitol is growing up. Did you notice those glass squares in front of the governor as she was speaking? I don't know about you, but I do not remember seeing those before. They are teleprompters, and they put the words you need on the screen right in front of you. Well, kind of like the words that I'm reading to you right now. Anyway, if you were watching our earlier newscast, you noticed our own Blair Best was covering Kotek's swearing in today. And I got to tell you, she is a rock star when it comes to those of us on the story asking her to go the extra mile to show you some behind the scenes work that goes on throughout the day. Here's what she put together for us today.
Hey Pat, it's just after 11 a.m. and we've arrived in Salem. We're now just walking up to the state capitol building. There's photojournalist Kurt Austin behind me carrying all the gear, and yeah, we're just about to head in. Big day today. All right, so we just walked inside and we had to put our things through this metal detector. Kurt is putting all the camera gear through the machine right now.
Do you mean to take off my keys and all that stuff?
Yep, cell phone, wallet, watch his keys. Go ahead and come over there.
All right, so we made it through security. We found the House chamber. We are now in the House chamber, and we are situated in the gallery, which is sort of like a balcony above where everyone else sits down there. And now we're just setting up our gear and waiting until 1 o'clock for Tina Kotek to be sworn in. All right, so I don't know if you can see behind me, but on each of the representatives' desks, there's a bright orange construction hat. They all also have spider plants as well on their desks. And I see them all packing up these bright construction hats. And there's a lot of construction going on here at the state capitol. It was hard to find parking. We had to enter through the back. So I don't know if these hats are symbolic or if they're required to wear them when they walk through the construction areas, but just something I noticed. Just leaving the state capitol building now. We just sat through an hour of Tina Kotek being introduced, different people giving speeches, and then finally, closer to 2 o'clock, Tina Kotek actually swore in and gave her inaugural speech. Now it is go time for us TV news crews. Got our script in for the 4 o'clock show, walking back to the car now where photojournalist Kurt Austin will edit the piece, and then we will get ready for the 4 o'clock show. All right, so we have relocated the car. We're now in front of the Capitol building, parked on the side of the street, and we're gonna put our story together. What a lot of people oftentimes don't know is that our office space is the passenger seat of a car, and the photographer sits in the back and edits the story together on a laptop. So we just finished our first live shot of the night at 4 o'clock, getting ready for our 5. We had some technical hurdles that we had to overcome last minute there, but hey, what is TV news without technical difficulties, right? So yeah, this is just a day in the life of what we do and bringing you the story of Governor-elect Tina Kotek being sworn in as the 39th governor of Oregon. And by the time the viewers of the story are watching this, we will be driving back to Portland. Thanks so much for following along.
And thank you, Blair. It is a ton of work behind the scenes, you guys. And beyond a new governor, this session brings the most diverse Oregon legislature in history. How about that? Just one example includes 5 Vietnamese American lawmakers sworn in today. Brian Clerkley caught up with them and brings us more from Salem.
It's a big day here in Salem, the most diverse legislature in Oregon's history, 19 people of color, and now Oregon has the most Vietnamese American representation in its legislature, more than any other state. A traditional Vietnamese lion dance to welcome 5 Vietnamese American legislators during the swearing-in ceremony in Salem. Rep. Daniel Nguyen represents Lake Oswego in southwest Portland. He's Vietnamese American, a small business owner, and is here with his family celebrating his new role. He says representation matters.
Among the 5 of us, we have a common background coming from refugee families, but we're all in different professions. Some of us are in the small business community, others are in the National Guard, in the medical fields.
Rep. Nguyen represents parts of East Portland, Damascus, Happy Valley, and Sandy. This traditional lion dance made everything feel so real to her. She says the more diversity within government, the better.
I felt seen in that capital. For historically, you've only seen certain types of people serving in that space.
Representative Con Pham was the first Vietnamese American legislator elected in 2020. Now she's happy to be serving with 4 other colleagues from her community.
I think it's a real testament to the resilience of refugees and immigrants, and also the capacity of Oregon to be a welcoming and inclusive state.
Inside the state capitol, family and friends gathered around. This historic moment, a special occasion for generations of Vietnamese Americans in the same room. Newly elected Rep. Hai Pham with District 36 says it will be nice to see people who look like him at the Capitol.
It makes me feel a lot more comfortable. 20 years ago it looked a lot different, but I felt so welcome through this entire process.
Rep. Thuy Tran represents House District 45, which is northeast Portland. She says she feels honored and privileged to be part of history.
Diversity will bring varied lived experiences and perspective to the table.
The official start to the legislative session is January 17th, and some of the issues lawmakers would like to focus on include housing, education, and public safety. In Salem, I'm Bryant Clerkley, KGW News.
Thank you, Bryant. Oregon doesn't get to have all the fun, by the way. Today, the Washington legislature began its annual session. This one is going to run 3.5 months. One of the big issues is gun violence. Governor Jay Inslee said he will support a bill that bans assault weapons. This is the 7th year, by the way, 7th year in a row that a bill like this has been introduced. It's failed the previous 6 years. I guess you would know that, but maybe the 7th's a charm. And similar to Oregon Measure 114, Inslee is also supporting a bill to require people to get a permit before they buy a gun.
You need to get a license to drive a car in the state of Washington. You need to get a license to go fishing. It's time that you get a license to make sure that you have safety training to purchase a gun in the state of Washington.
Inslee and Attorney General Bob Ferguson are calling for a bill that would allow the firearms industry to face consequences for irresponsible practices and for a ban on the sale of assault weapons.
I do feel that there's just a momentum that's been growing with the people of the state, unfortunately in large part due to news that you read literally every day about mass shootings.
Gun rights groups have promised to fight these bills. Another big issue in Washington state, law and order and staffing for police departments. There's a bill that would send millions of dollars to cities and counties for signing bonuses to attract new officers and also to pay retention bonuses to keep the current officers from leaving. Governor Inslee also said he's open to taking a second look at a law that limits when police can chase suspects. Some police and sheriff's deputies have said criminals are taking advantage of the restrictions. On the drug front, advocates want Washington state to become the second in the nation after Oregon to decriminalize user amounts of illegal drugs. The Seattle Times reports that 2 Democratic lawmakers will introduce a bill this session, but the paper also says one of the lawmakers believes the legislature is not likely to pass the bill, and Governor Jay Inslee has said he does not support decriminalization. Some state lawmakers in Olympia will also push to protect abortion by amending the state constitution. It's unclear if that will succeed also. Even if the legislature does pass the amendment, voters would have a final say in the next general election. But there will be other efforts to protect abortion, including declaring the state a sanctuary, making it easy for women from other states to get abortions in Washington, and for doctors to move to Washington to perform abortions. Washington, like Oregon, has a housing shortage. In Governor Inslee's 2-year budget, he's proposing to spend $4 billion to build tens of thousands of affordable housing units. Austin Jenkins is the host of a show called Inside Olympia and a former KGW reporter who follows the Washington legislature closely.
We haven't seen anything like this in a number of years, decades, in fact. And what the governor is saying is that the time has come for a solution out of Olympia that meets the scope of the state's housing and homelessness crisis.
The Washington State Legislature Information Center reports that roughly 1,000 bills are introduced into the legislature during these odd-numbered years that have longer sessions than the even-numbered years. So the odd ones are long, the even a little bit shorter. Either way, even though a lot of our focus is here in Oregon, we keep our eyes and ears pointed to the north and will bring you any big developments from Olympia as it comes along. Still to come on the story. Oregon has a new law on the books aimed at giving overtime pay to agricultural workers.
I do take responsibility for changing a system that was rooted in racism.
It's year 1 of a 5-year plan, but for a peek into the future, we don't need a crystal ball. We can look to California, which passed a similar law in 2016. A recent report shows it's not going the way they expected, but advocates are adamant these are just growing pains. That's next when the story returns. Welcome back. Let's talk about agriculture in Oregon and specifically how farm workers are paid. Starting this month, the state's agriculture overtime law took effect. It's a 5-year process, and in this first year, the overtime threshold is 55 hours per week. Anything above 55 hours must be paid time and a half. Here's how that threshold changes over time. 55 hours this year and next, then it goes down to 48 hours in 2025 and 26, and then down to the usual 40 hours in 2027. Now, this affects all 85,000 plus farm workers in the state of Oregon, and overtime pay is something they've not been legally entitled to for more than 80 years. And on the surface, you may be thinking, well, this sounds like a great idea. These workers will finally be getting paid the way they should be. And that's how many Democratic lawmakers saw it as well last year, including the chief sponsor of the bill, Andrea Salinas.
I don't blame anybody today for setting that system up, but I do take responsibility for changing a system that was rooted in racism.
Detractors of the bill, like the Oregon Farm Bureau, for example, argued it's not going to do what they wanted, that it would decimate the state's fruit, vegetable, and dairy industry, and that farmers would reduce worker hours and look to machines to do the work in order to avoid paying that overtime and employ fewer workers. Now, look, we're only 9 days into the new year, so we can't really measure the success or failure of the law just yet in Oregon, but our neighbors to the north and south, California and Washington, if you're geographically impaired like I am, those neighbors are a bit farther along in the process. And a recent article from the Sacramento Bee talks about just how that law is working in the Golden State, or not so much. It's an article that we think is worth your time. The headline reads, "Overtime law was supposed to help these California workers. Many make less money now." Pretty self-explanatory, but let's take a deeper look. California's overtime law began in 2016, and as of this month, smaller farms have to pay overtime for anything more than 50 hours a week, while larger farms, those with at least 26 employees, are already down to 40 hours a week. The Sacramento Bee reports that farm workers are telling them that since the new law took effect, they're largely not getting paid overtime because their hours are being cut to avoid it. And that means their take-home pay is suffering as well. One worker says over the past 2 years, his take-home pay dropped from $1,000 a week down to $600, and that it's because his hours were slashed from 60 down to 40. The president of the California Fresh Fruit Association, which was against the bill in the first place there in California, says the law has been frustrating for employers as well. He says it's prompted growers to cut hours, reduce the acreage they farm, hire more workers to work shorter weeks to avoid that OT, as well as turning to machines for less labor. And while all of that sounds bad for farm workers, the United Farm Workers Union, who obviously backed the law, says that is the point. They say these growing pains are part of the movement towards a more just agricultural economy. The group's communications director said the amount of workers that are getting their hours cut, well, that speaks to the reality that there was a ton of unpaid overtime being worked. He went on to say that farm workers often live right at the poverty line and, quote, any attempt to change that is shaking the very foundations of the industry. And it seems their argument is that change is hard, but that this change is worth the tough times because it's pushing things in the right direction for the future. So, are tougher times on the horizon here in Oregon now that we're in the first stage of this farm overtime bill? Possibly. We'll have to wait and see. But will it be worth it for the future? That's going to be up for you to decide. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You could email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, if you tend to stay away from screens over the weekend, well, as much as you can anyway, you may have missed a lot of big news here on KGW, but not to worry, we've got you covered and it's coming up next. We had a busy weekend around the greater metro area. Here's what you missed. Saturday night, a shooting outside a basketball game at Franklin High School left one person injured. Police said it was not life-threatening. A 15-year-old boy was arrested and a gun was found.
I started hearing like 5 to 8, seemed like firecracker noises, and I thought, what's going on? And then my brain went into overdrive and I realized what was happening. And I just started sprinting.
Also this weekend, 22-year-old Jacob Hollenbeck, who is housed and who had given the gift of friendship to several homeless campers in his neighborhood, got that gift returned.
Yeah, so I was coming back from getting some food at around 11 p.m. when I saw an unhoused person who I knew from the area had actually just helped them that night, gotten him some dinner. And when I came back, he told me to give him my food, and I told him that I was planning on eating it. And before I could offer to even share it, he grew really belligerent. He has a lot of mental health and drug problems, and he had a shard of glass in his hand, and he was telling me that he was going to kill me, and I was paralyzed.
As you can imagine. That's when other campers nearby jumped in to help. They came out of their tents to keep Jacob safe. Finally, West Lynn has a new mayor. He's 23 years old. He won a seat on the city council at the age of 21, was appointed council president at 23, and now has been appointed mayor.
And I got involved with some city issues in high school. That's when I kind of fell in love with government, if you will.
Congratulations. The city has 27,000 residents and a $70 million budget. If you missed any of our coverage here on The Story, you can get all caught up for free with our newsletter. Just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code on your screen now. It'll take you to a link where you can sign up, and you'll get all of our biggest stories in your email every week. All righty, keep sending your questions and comments to thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. That's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And a quick programming note, we will not have a show tomorrow night for you because the Golden Globes are going to be airing during our time slot. But don't worry, we'll be right back here on Wednesday. And remember, the story, our story, that never ends. I'll see you Wednesday.